Hey everybody! During the month of May, there was EmblemCon 2025, and this year I made a digital escape room experience for the event. Now, of course, it's been some time since then, and a few people managed to actually escape the room. Congratulations once again to you all. But other people may be coming to it after the fact, or they might want to know a bit more about the construction after completing their escape. So this video is going to be a bit of a solution guide and a behind the scenes. So the way I'll do this is for each chamber in the escape room, if you are playing along with this and you just need like a hint or two to get you through it, I will open each section with some vague hints, and then I'll talk about the actual solution and the thought process that went into me coming up with that solution. And I'll include timestamps so you can jump around to specific parts that you might be the most interested in, or the parts that you happen to be stuck on now. We also did cover the first 4 chambers during the panel at EmblemCon, so you can go to the EmblemCon channel, see the Fire Emblem Escape panel for yourself, and watch Akka get through the first 4 chambers with a little goading from me in the audience. That said, let's begin our little journey here. At the very beginning, as I was putting this together, I was trying to think about as many accessibility options as I could reasonably provide in a Google form. So while I made a video intro to try and set the tone and ambiance and imbue some lore into the directions, ultimately I knew that some people may have trouble following with the video. It's not captioned or anything, so I also took the video, turned it into a transcript so you could just read what I was saying. So rather than show the video again, I'll just go through the transcript here. These are directions for the escape room itself, and you got these calendars with pictures in it. We'll get to that in a second. As you scroll down, you finish reading the directions on the mechanics. I really liked the alternate realm sown with Discord piece of this, where I was like, you know, it's a convention. Everyone's here working on the same thing. You might be able to help each other. And then Emblem Conquer, which is EmblemCon with an extra syllable. Alright, to officially enter the trial, seek the date where it all began. So, your first hint, if you're stuck on this entrance, is we did just scroll past a bunch of calendars and you were told to seek a date. So you might want to look specifically at the dates that happen to have Fire Emblem units on them. You try and think, you know, where it all began, where what all began. That's the real question here. And now on to the solution itself, so stop here if you're only looking for a hint. So where it all began means the Fire Emblem series. These are specifically dated 1990. And I threw in a few months so that you'd have to sift through a bit if you didn't already know the answer to this question. But it is, in fact, on April 20th, 1990, so Saber's picture is in that spot on the calendar. You would also have to figure out who the unit is if you don't know them. And that lets you into Chamber 1. This room has a wall of portraits and a mural with a spot that is, you know, kind of censored, for lack of a better word. And we need to summon 1 unit in front of this mural. Now, if you're looking for a hint on Chamber 1, first think about the arrangement of this mural. And then your second hint, if you need one, is don't think about the units so much as what those units would represent. Now, most people who attended EmblemCon got this pretty quickly, so now let's just go on to the actual solution. This is the weapon triangle. Marv is a sword user. The other unit down there, whose name I'm blanking on, is a lance user. So we need to fill in the mural with an axe user. And on the wall of portraits, there is only 1 axe user. And that is Camilla from Fates. And that gets you into Chamber 2. But Camilla gives you this scroll, and I'll talk about this scroll more in a bit, but it says Chickenlicious. It's meant to help you with a later puzzle. Okay, sorry, now we're officially in Chamber 2 with the 4 pillars. There is a plaque that reads, "Across the ages, heroes have risen," and we're expected to summon 4 units, 1 for each pillar. Your first hint here is that you've really got to think about the phrase "across the ages." And your second hint is that heroes have risen. Have we seen anything so far that might pair with the word risen? Well, we take a look at the wall of portraits here, zooming in if we need to. And yeah, you might notice that some of the portraits are actually higher up than the others. I was hoping that this would be kind of suspicious from the get-go, because it's not symmetrical or anything. Like, there's no other reason why these 4 particular heroes should have their portraits placed higher up on the wall than the others. And none of them were the answer to the first puzzle. That was Camilla, who was placed down low with everyone else. So I was kind of hoping you'd leave this puzzle and be like, but wait, why were there 4 pictures that were higher up than the others? Let's get back to the pillars. So there were 4 pictures that were higher up, and now there are 4 pillars. And each of these pillars not only has a shape on it just to make it easier to identify. I thought it would be simpler to say the pillar with the star than it would be to say the second from the left. You know, just like a little easier on the flow. But if you look at the star pillar, it's got a white line that's lower than all the rest, and the one with the heart has a line that is higher than all the rest. And this plaque mentions across the ages. So that's where I'm going to stop giving hints. And now on to the actual solution. So these lines are meant to indicate the character's canonical age. And we don't have exact canonical ages for every character, so I specifically picked 4 units where we were at least able to tell who was the youngest and who was the oldest without any sort of argument. So the star pillar has the lowest line. That means the unit who has the lowest age from the 4 in that other room. And of course that is Sanaki from Fates, canonically 13. The red heart is the oldest one, and that's Tiki because, you know, it's a Manakete. Tiki is thousands of years old, should be much older than the other units there who are not Manaketes. And then I need to remember the names of the other unit. One of them is Janoff. I forget which one Janoff is. So, like, you'd have to look this stuff up if you didn't know, or ask around the EmblemCon Discord. I know one of them is Janoff. And the form will tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, so Janoff is the green pillar. He's the second oldest, I think 100 something was the age there. And then finally, the last unit was someone in, like, adulthood, 20s, 30s. Or, like, under 100. So firmly between Sanaki and Janoff. Alright, took a second to look up which unit I had used on this puzzle. It's Hugh. H-U-G-H. And that allows us to move on to Chamber 3. Which is the Trinity Rune, and we need to summon 3 units in alphabetical order based on this rune. That's one big rune. Might want to zoom out even. Alright, there's most of it. So your first hint is, you know, you have this one symbol that is supposed to represent 3 units, so you might want to think about the implications of that. And your second hint is that it's called the Trinity Rune not just because we're solving 3 units. There's another reason why the word Trinity was used for this particular rune. And now on to the solution. The Trinity rune is a hint that this is from 3 houses. The name Trinity, 3, you know, that's telling you which Fire Emblem game to think about. A lot of people saw this and knew that it had something to do with the crests from 3 houses pretty quickly. But the trick is I merged 3 of them together and rearranged them a bit. Like one of them is actually rotated upside down. I tried to make it look like one cohesive symbol as much as I could while they were overlapping, just to try and bring out the trickery, but you can still identify the individual parts of certain crests. Yeah, these 3 crests just so happen to belong to Hilda, Ingrid, and from the Ashen Wolves, Yuri. Alright, we take a little break at the Oasis where you get your fishing rod, as well as a Monville bass and a Simian herring. These come into play later. Zoom back in, and now we're on Chamber 4, which is the Tome of Radiance. This is the last one that we covered during the panel. So we have this booklet here. And I included a video here that's flipping through the book because I wanted an element of you being able to flip through the book yourself, but managing that on a Google form, it would have been way too many pages. So I opted to make a little PowerPoint where it looks like the book is flipping through because they have a specific page turning animation for a slide transition. So you open the Tome of Radiance, and so the pages start getting numbered at 5. There's words on page 6, and so on. Like, the big hint is to just think about what this book is actually representing. You'll notice the purple summoning circle on page 15, so that is the page that will give us the answer to the puzzle, since we are supposed to summon a particular unit. And on the very back, possibly one of the biggest hints there, is, of course, the phone number on the back of the book. But trust me, you don't need to call that phone number in order to figure out what it's for. And I especially encourage anyone outside the US not to call that number and incur phone charges of immense proportion, because it's just for a silly little puzzle. You know, you can Google phone numbers, and Google's pretty good about telling you where it'll go. But yeah, think about what this book represents, where you might find those words and that phone number. And now onto the solution. This book, it represents the US edition. And keep in mind, I'm based in the US, so everything here is based on US edition stuff. But the phone number was also a hint that it's based off the US edition, so go me for including that. I just thought it'd be funny if people tried to call the phone number. Anyway, it's based off the US edition of the Fire Emblem Path of Radiance manual. So it was my hope that during the con, people would be able to reference their real-world Fire Emblem stuff in order to solve these puzzles together. And so one person might have a copy of the Fire Emblem Path of Radiance manual, and they might be getting hit up by other people at the con who don't have the manual and be like, hey, can you tell me what's on page 15 of the manual so that I can solve this puzzle? And so, yeah, the summoning circle is on page 15 in a spot where if you go to page 15 in the US manual, there's a picture of Leif. I'm not entirely sure how the name is pronounced. I'm going to say Leif. And that should let you into this page that says the book gives you another hint for a future puzzle that says you'll need to summon every last ounce of strength, because the tome in all its wisdom knows everything that you need to know. All right, Chamber 5. This is picking up from where we left off and the panel. So, we're in all new territory here. This room has 5 archways with these symbols inside of them, and you need to figure out which unit to summon in front of each. There is also a plaque in the room with the letters 3, they're not letters, 30B0V0P. And that's the only hint that you get in this room. So obviously the sequence of numbers and letters on that plaque is immensely important to what this room is. So I just left it as vague as possible. I was hoping people would flounder about in the Discord being like, what the heck is this code? Have you tried this thing? Someone figure it out. I suppose the one hint that I can try and give as to what this sequence of numbers and letters is and what you should do with it. Your one hint is to think about where you might see these symbols in Fire Emblem. Alright, and with that hint aside, let's just go ahead and spoil the solution now. This is an Outrealm code that you have to enter into the tower in Fire Emblem Engage in order to see a custom map that I made, which will outright tell you the solution. On that custom map, I arranged a bunch of wells and put a unit. Yeah, I put a unit surrounded by wells, a unit surrounded by alpacas, a unit surrounded by snowmen, by cactuses, and by treasure chests. So as soon as you enter this code and look at my custom map, you can see which units are there. Now, this is actually a puzzle. I did change one thing in the development of this puzzle. My playtester immediately guessed Amber for the alpaca, which just so happened to be the right answer, but I think they assumed it for the wrong reason. So I deliberately went back and made sure that it wasn't Amber sitting in that spot before the final release of this escape room. I also thought it would be neat to add a little extra layer. The person in the cactuses, you'll see a ring symbol above the cactus, and so I equipped an emblem ring to that unit, and you actually have to enter the name of the unit who is on that emblem ring. So now let's just go ahead and type in the answers. Alright, the leftmost archway is the well. It should be Rosado. Then the next one over is the alpaca, who I deliberately changed to a different unit from Amber. At least I thought I did. Now I have to remember who I changed it to. It was Fogado. Okay. Fogado is now the alpaca person. The center archway is the snowman, which I believe is where I put Saphir. Right, the cactus with the ring, the emblem ring that is equipped has Lucina. And finally in front of the rightmost archway is Yunaka. But pretty fitting to have Yunaka with the treasure. Speaking of Yunaka, after solving that puzzle, you have summoned Yunaka, and she gives you a scroll in the same vein as the Chickenlicious scroll from earlier, which, note, we haven't used it yet. This one has her signature, Haya Papaya. But when I'm editing this, I will try and put footage of my custom map on the screen so that you can see exactly what you're missing out on from the Outrealm trials. But now on to Chapter 6. This is a largely empty chamber, but there is a single plaque on the wall, and it says GPOJD-LRLLGLGYJRLVV. Now, anyone who has done escape room type puzzles before, I'm hoping that when you see this plaque and it looks like a bunch of nonsense letters, that you have a vague idea of what sort of thing you need to do to solve it. And so that's your hint. What would you normally do with a bunch of scrambled up letters like this? I mean, there's a couple options, but like it's a pretty typical escape room puzzle formula. All right, and now on to the solution. This is a shift cipher. This is a shift cipher, and you're like, okay, but in order to solve a cipher, don't I need some sort of code or key to be able to decode it, you know, unencrypt it, shift all the letters back to what they need to be? And guess what? You already have one. When I'm editing this, I will put my notebook on the screen to show how I did the addition equation to make this work. So if you use the key Chickenlicious, and you do have to use wraparound because this word is longer than Chickenlicious, so you do have to use Chickenlicious and then start using Chickenlicious again. That's just a way that shift ciphers work, is if the key is shorter than the code, then you keep repeating the key until you get there. So yeah, anyway, this translates to 8-headed serpent. So even then, it's not directly telling you the unit. You still need to interpret the phrase 8-headed serpent. But we're looking for a Fire Emblem unit that is, you know, somewhat related to the phrase 8-headed serpent. So if you know your mythology, the 8-headed serpent is Orochi, who happens to be a unit in Fire Emblem Fates. Chickenlicious is also a phrase that is used in Fire Emblem Fates, and that is why it was gifted to you by Camilla from Fire Emblem Fates earlier in the escape room. So I tried to keep everything on theme here. But that is how the Chickenlicious scroll is meant to be used. For Chamber 7, there's another accessibility option. This is an audio puzzle, but I figured not everyone would be good with an audio puzzle, so I put in an alternative version that uses sheet music instead of audio music. It will be easier for me to show the sheet music portion here, so that's what I'm gonna do. But this is a chamber with instruments. You got a piano, a xylophone, a harp, and a saxophone. And so when you look at the mysterious melody or listen to it in the audio version, you'll get these notes. And I would say the sheet music version of this puzzle is probably easier, because if you can read sheet music, then it should be a little easier to tell what's going on. Anyway, the saxophone is playing the notes. Well, let's just say that's your hint. And now on to the solution. So the saxophone is playing the notes F, A, E. Yes, it is as simple as that. The glockenspiel is playing F, E, E. By the way, I used a sustained note and changed instruments to indicate when the name would change. The harp is playing the notes C, A, E, D, A. I used a low A and a high A to mix it up, and plus it just sounded nicer in the audio version. Now the last one is an A minor chord, so you might think A, C, A, E, what? No, it's actually just chord, but you have to take it phonetically. Chord in Fire Emblem is spelled without an H, even though chord with music is spelled with an H. Chamber 8 is the Tome of Advancement. So, just like the Tome of Radiance was a hint to the Path of Radiance manual, the Tome of Advancement is a hint to another book. So, I figured this way, you know, someone might own the Path of Radiance manual, but not the Advance manual. And so that's your big hint. Go look up more Fire Emblem manuals if you need help getting through this one. But otherwise, I'm pretty primed to go over the solution in just a bit. There are a lot of blank pages in this one because it's a long manual, and I didn't want to include too many pages of text to make it too obvious. Yeah, it's a very long manual. Still going. The other thing about using the video format is that you could potentially pause the video if you need to look at a page longer. Anyway, that's the Fire Emblem GBA manual. At least here in the US, it was just called Fire Emblem. But most people know that it's actually the Blazing Blade. But anyway, if you look at the US Fire Emblem Game Boy manual, and then look at the page with the circle on it, then you will find a picture of, I do believe it's Hector. Boom. And the tome gives you the hint summon the unit that can fill the storage. Okay, now we get to a room where people really did not understand the intended method of solving this one. They got through it, but I am very eager to tell you how you were supposed to hypothetically solve this. Alright, there are 4 portraits on the wall, and there's a plaque underneath, and there's a lot of sentences on those plaques. So your first hint is think about where these sentences would come from. And also, for that matter, why are these sentences paired with the particular unit whose portrait is above them? So, like, what do these lines have to do with Florina? And what does the next set of lines have to do with... I haven't played that game, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce that name. But what do these lines have to do with Byleth? And then what do these lines have to do with... Did I write Byleth on both of these? Okay, this should say Jerome on the last one. I'm gonna fix that before I release this video. Your second hint is to take a very close look at everything in this room before you make assumptions about what to do. And so, with the hints out of the way, let's get into the solution and my rationale behind it. So, I wanted to include something to do with support conversations because they have become a major staple of the Fire Emblem series. So, this puzzle is figuring out which unit you're supposed to have a support conversation with, and then summoning those units. So, I could only pull from games that had support conversations. A lot of the older ones did not. But Florina has these lines pulled from various support conversations. And so, okay, here's the thing. Each of these lines comes from a support conversation with a different unit. So you could brute force it. You could try entering all 6 names of the units in the line underneath and see which one is the correct answer. And that'll get you there. But the intended way of knowing which of the 6 to use is actually here at the top of the chamber. It might blend in a little bit, and, you know, because this is a later chamber, it was my goal to be a little less obvious. So I chose the specific shade of brown that I did because it stands out enough, but it still looks like it could fit in this room, even though those fish up there were not in the room before. Now, where have we seen the fish? We go back to our inventory. We have a blue and a red fish. And at this point, I will just spell out. A lot of people figured this out very quickly. But the red fish is a herring. It's a red herring. You are not going to be using the Samian herring at any point in this escape room. That's just for fun. But the other fish is not a red herring. That is a Monville bass. That blue fish up there is a Monville bass. There's not a particular reason why it's blue other than to differentiate it, make it stand out on the inventory screen. The key thing is it's a bass. B-A-S-S. Bass. So you need to pick Florina's B rank support conversation. And then the second person's A rank support conversation. And for Byleth and Jerome, we're looking for an S rank conversation. So among these 6 lines, I made sure only one of them came from the correct support rank. And that is the unit you need to summon in front of each. Alright, so in the case of Florina, we need a B rank support, and that actually comes from this very last line here. No, I'm a bug. Remember, look at me with disgust. That is her B rank support conversation with Sarah. On the second one down, we are looking for the A rank support conversation, since we're going BA. And that is naked. I was only showing you the scar on my shoulder like you asked in a conversation with Ephraim. We're looking for an S ranked conversation with Byleth, and in this case, it is besides naps are the entire point of retirement. which would only have been said by Linhart. Be careful on the spelling of that name. And finally, the one where I'm going to fix the typo and say Jerome's portrait. This is specifically Jerome. We're also looking for an S-rank conversation here. And that's from Noir, or however that name is pronounced. I haven't played Fates yet, or Awakening, whichever one this was. I think it was Awakening. Yeah, it was Awakening. Anyway, gods, but you can be a wet fish sometimes. The very first one, actually. And so we have our final hand scroll, which reads Potato Molester, which is also a line from Awakening, again on theme. And now you'll notice that all the tan scrolls have been specifically food themed. Chicken-licious, Haya Papaya, Potato Molester. Which, by the way, Potato Molester is a line from Lissa, in case anyone was curious about that being there. Alright, next chamber. We get to a computer. We see that we are missing 1 gigabyte from having full storage. And so, yeah, we need a unit that can fill the storage, as the purple scroll indicated earlier from one of the tomes. So your one hint, in case the purple hint wasn't enough, is this is one of the puzzles where I based it off the idea that since we're summoning units in Fire Emblem, that I would use units of measurement that are represented by units in Fire Emblem. So, how much are we missing from this computer? And, you know, what's another way of saying that? But on to the solution and the rationale behind it. So, we are missing 1 gigabyte from filling this storage. So we need to summon 1 unit that contains a gigabyte. The abbreviation for gigabyte is GB. And of all playable units in Fire Emblem, there is only 1 unit that has a GB in it. Big Bert, who I spelled wrong. Big Bert with the I in front of the E. Let's see, right in the middle of the name is GB for gigabyte. And I checked every playable unit in Fire Emblem up until Engage. This is the only unit with a GB in their name. And now we come to another room with a plaque. Now, having explained an earlier chamber already in terms of like, hey, look at these letters, now you should already know what to do on this chamber if you recall the last time this happened. So now I'm gonna spell out the solution, but you should pause here if you wanna and unencrypt it yourself. This particular puzzle goes to the Potato Molester scroll. And when you use Potato Molester on the Shift cipher, you get Shepherd Scholar. Shepherd Scholar. And that scroll comes from Awakening, in case you need another hint. So we need a Shepherd Scholar from Awakening. And that's going to be Miriel. Alright, we've come to the second room, and I'll admit this one's a bit of a trickier one. So I tried to make it look like a cube here so that it had a little more presence in the picture. But when we take the close-up look, it's this symbol. So you really got to think carefully about what Fire Emblem-related thing has this symbol or something that looks vaguely like this symbol in it. Your other hint is that, of course, just like the Trinity rune was a hint about it being for 3 houses, this is the Illusory rune. Illusory. People who know the source material know why I chose that word. But now, in case you don't, the solution. These symbols, just like the 3 crests from 3 houses, I took 3 symbols from Tokyo Mirage Sessions, a place where you go into illusory dungeons, by the way. you know, illusion, mirage. That's why they chose that word for the game and why I chose it here. But these are 3 symbols from Tokyo Mirage Sessions units that have been fused together. So the upper right portion with the helmet, that is Draug, as he is paired with Mamori. The underneath that section is actually the bottom half of the witch symbol for Tharja, paired with Kiria. But on the left side, you have the bow, which belongs to Virion, paired with Eleonora. And that's those 3 units in alphabetical order. Finally, we come to the final tome, the Tome of Origin, and this one is a little interesting because of where I got it from. You'll notice the purple circle was on page 12, so we do need to keep an eye out for what unit is going to appear on page 12 of this particular book. It was much shorter, and some people had trouble deducing exactly where this comes from, so your one hint is, of course, to think of the word origin. Why would I call this the Tome of Origin? Origin, beginnings. Okay, but now in the book, there is another big hint. Big hint in the book. I believe it comes near the end. This is the Tome of Origin. However, you'll see the year 2020 on the bottom left of page 15. So what game is Origin, but also 2020? Right. The guide that I pulled this from, and I'll put a picture on the screen at this point in the video, but this is the digital manual that Nintendo posted to their website upon the release of Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light on the Fire Emblem 30th anniversary. Of course, it was a limited release, but the manual is still publicly viewable online. And it looks very different from the original Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light manual. So people who were like, I don't know why this doesn't match when I look at the Fire Emblem 1 manual, that's why. So we are specifically pulling from that one, and one person at EmblemCon will be very happy to know that Dolph was a solution to one of my puzzles. And so the tome gives you the final purple scroll. Summon the units who will measure up to the task. And so we come to our final cipher. There is only one scroll related to the food that we have not used yet. Pause here if you want to go solve it for yourself. When you use the Haya Papaya scroll from way back, this plaque translates to princely baseball shape. And so now pause here if you want to think about what that means without me spoiling the solution for you. But I had to ask a lot of people who needed a hint on this one. What shape is used in baseball? And of course, the answer is a diamond. Because baseball diamond. So now we tack princely onto that. Think princely diamond. And then it becomes a little more obvious that we are in fact talking about Prince Diamant, who is from Engage, where the phrase Haya Papaya and the unit who gave it to us, Yunaka, come from. Now we enter the last couple doozies of a puzzle. We have a beaker in the middle of the room. And the side is only labeled with the first 2 notches at 4, the next 2 notches being 8. So first you have to do a little implied math here about like how high up is that water level. And then how much more water do we need to reach the final line on the beaker. And so of course that's going to be 2. But 2 what? That's the first thing you should think about. Now remember, the last time we had a room like this was when there was the computer and it was missing 1 gigabyte. It was almost full, but we were missing 1 gigabyte. And there was a purple scroll that mentioned filling the storage, and that was our hint for that one. So maybe now go look back at your purple scrolls. Or wait 5 more seconds and I will tell you the solution, which is the purple scroll that says summon every last ounce of strength. We need 2 ounces to make every last ounce in the beaker. That's why we're summoning 2 units. Now this one's a little tougher because, especially for people outside the US, or English not being a first thing, English is weird, right? It's ounces, but it's abbreviated OZ. We need 2 units containing OZ. And so I know one of them is Dazla, the OZ right after the D. And the other one, which I wrote down somewhere here, is, of course, Mozu. And thus we come to the final rune, which is the Rune of Slumber. So again, think about where this might come from, why I chose the word slumber. And so this one is where I did the most, what's it called? Mutilation of the original symbols to make them look completely different. Like, you see these wing-looking things on the structure? That symbol has actually been sliced in half and rotated in 2 opposite directions. So yeah, I went all out with this one. Of course, you could also brute force it, because if you figure out which game this comes from, you'll know there's like only 12 possible options in the first place. But now on to the completely spoilery solution. Slumber is Fire Emblem Engage. These symbols are from Engage. There are 3 of the emblem ring symbols. The one that was sliced in half, and also the first one alphabetically, is Celica. Double checks notes for the other 2. One of them is Micaiah. And finally, good old Sigurd. Thus, we reach a very big measuring tape, and we need, you know, units who can measure up to the task. This measuring tape goes up to 108. Now, people who have used a measuring tape are probably familiar with the fact that it goes to inches. So, we have a measuring tape here showing 108 inches. And in order to summon the 3 units who measure up to 108 inches, we had to think, what would each unit need to be to make 108 inches? On to the solution. When you take 108 and divide it by 3, you get 36. So what's a unit that's 36 inches long? That would be a yard, 3 feet. The way to abbreviate yard is YD, so we need the 3 playable Fire Emblem units whose names contain YD. As such, I wrote these down, I swear. As such, we need Boyd. And then, the tricky one, because it doesn't end in YD like Boyd does, we need Hayden. And finally, Lloyd. And with that, congratulations, you have escaped from Fire Emblem Escape. And I put in a really bad automaton cover and a survey at the end to quote-unquote reward people for playing along. But yeah, that was a contribution I made to EmblemCon this year. I think a bunch of people did have fun working on it, piece by piece during the con, having something to go back to, talk to each other about. So I do have my mind set on, is there another asynchronous activity that I could put together for the next EmblemCon? I don't know about doing another escape room, because I think most of the puzzles that I'm able to come up with, having only played a few of the Fire Emblem games and relying mostly on the names of units for these puzzles. You know, might be out of ideas there, but I'm going to see what I can come up with. So, thanks to everyone who played and gave feedback on Fire Emblem Escape. It's greatly appreciated. And hopefully this solution guide was a fun little look at how I decided to put these puzzles together. And of course, if you want more fun in the future, then stick around on this channel. But until then, bye.